We'll be hearing today from EJ Bercier, Hydrologist with Water Resources, Mike Smith, Chief Meteorologist with Wildland Fire Management, and Greg Blackjack, Director of the Emergency Measures Organization. Minister Richard Mostyn will be saying some words to start us off. We do have a lot of information to get through today, so please hold questions until all of our speakers have concluded. Thank you, Minister Mostyn.
Thanks very much, Julia. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here on the slightly cloudy and warming traditional territories of the Kwanadan First Nation and the Tonkwatchan Council. We're here to talk emergency preparedness. It's a priority for our government, and we're working with communities across the territory to support emergency response and community safety. It's already halfway through April. It's already halfway through April, for goodness sakes. That's crazy. We should all be thinking about what the spring and summer will bring, and I know many people are. Our forecasters are here to tell you how they're here to tell you what they can about what the season has in store. But the other half of the equation is to be ready for anything. You have to get your 72-hour kit and family emergency plan. I sound like a broken record on this file, but we really do have to take some personal responsibility for emergency preparedness. So please start dusting off those plans, take a look around, find your kit. And when you're traveling through the territory, make sure that you have your car outfitted for any emergency. I'm now going to get out of your way and turn it over to the officials, and I'll be available for any questions at the end of the briefing you may have for me. With that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Minister. First, we'll be hearing from Water Resources Branch.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'll just get my slides up here. Okay, can you see the deck?
We're seeing your presenter view, EJ.
Okay. How
There
about
we go.
this?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
just the deck.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is EJ Bercier. I am a hydrologist with the Water Resources Branch. And I'll be presenting a few key items. So first off, our April 1st snowpack, current water and ice conditions, our flood potential forecast for the season. And then I'll go over some breakup and freshet concerns that we have. And how to find information for the season. And then I'll kind of wrap that up with a summary. So the Water Resources Branch and partners collect information at 57 snow survey sites across the territory, covering all 11 major basins. This information is used to evaluate the potential for spring flooding caused by both breakup ice jams and large spring snowmelt or freshet flows. That being said, it's important to note that other processes such as spring weather, summer rain, and glacial melt can significantly influence maximum annual water levels in various specific Yukon basins. So the snowpack this year is average across most of the territory with the lower Yukon River Basin, so that's the Klondike-Dawson region, reporting a higher than average snowpack, while the Pelly, Alsek, and Upper Yukon, so that's the Southern Lakes, those basins are reporting below average snowpack. The snowpack in the Klondike is very similar to reported values in 2024 and 2023, so values we are familiar with going into spring. And the Porcupine Basin has just over half the snowpack it saw last year at this time. Although this year's mostly average snowpack comes as a bit of a relief, the past 4 years are certainly a reminder of how sensitive our watersheds and communities are to flooding based on snowpack and a slew of different spring weather factors. You can see on these SWE maps from the past 4 years how truly variable our snowpack can be. So currently, most rivers are flowing at or slightly above their normal range across the territory, due in part to the warmer than average winter. Groundwater was lower in the fall of 2024 than it has been over the last several years, so that impacts specific communities. Freeze up was uneventful on most rivers, with a smooth transition from fall to winter, reducing the risk of large ice consolidations and channel blockages come spring. Current ice thicknesses are below average across most of the territory due to our warmer winter, except in Old Crow, where snowfall came later, and the ice grew fairly quickly before slowing under the January kind of snowfall blanket. So generally, across the Yukon, the warm winter has reduced the risk for ice jam flooding in most basins, except for the Porcupine River. We had a warmer than average month of April to date, which is good news. An early start to snowmelt, of course, means gradual thaw pulses. So, slowly but surely rather than a big and late sudden snowmelt onset. Our flood potential forecast is out for the season as of yesterday morning. These risks assume, or the ratings rather, assume that critical flood mitigation infrastructure, such as dikes and stormwater drainage valves, are functional and well maintained where they are present. And those locations will be marked with an asterisk. So our ice jam flood risk assessment is based on ice thickness, freeze-up conditions, and ice surface conditions as of early April. So far, the Klondike River has a thinner than average ice cover due to the warmer than average winter. Freeze-up occurred smoothly on the Klondike. The ice surface is mostly bare of snow and decaying because we had such a warm early start to the month of April. And these conditions are, a lot different from what they were in 2023, where we saw a cold winter, thicker than average ice, a late onset of spring conditions, and then a sudden warming combined with above average snowpack that remained late into May. So that's all in 2023. So much different conditions going into spring this season. The Porcupine River at Old Crow has a moderate ice jam flood risk due mainly to the thicker than average ice. Mostly snow-covered ice cover to date, and very minimal melt in April so far. In terms of snowmelt peak flows, the combination of above average base flows in the Klondike and an above average snowpack make the river and surrounding areas more sensitive to the potential for a rapid snowmelt. Flow increases are limited during breakup because typically we have cooler daytime and nighttime temperatures with moderate snowmelt inputs, whereas snowmelt during freshet can be rapid and continuous throughout the day and night. So the time of year also makes it more susceptible to a rain on snow event, which can cause a rapid rise in flows. And this particular situation or combination led to open water flooding on the Klondike in May 2023. So to wrap up our flood risk summary, our main breakup concern is on the Porcupine River at Old Crow, and then our main freshet flooding concern is on the Klondike due to the combinations mentioned. A sudden warming or a rain on snow event could result in a rapid rise in flows and potential flooding. And ice jamming is unlikely due to the high driving forces on the Klondike, such as, high base flows and above average snowpack against our resisting forces, which is the ice cover, which is already deteriorating fairly well. So sustained ice jamming is unlikely on the Klondike this year. In terms of how to find information this season, throughout the year, we adjust the current situation page on the Flood Hub with updated conditions and forecasts. These conditions are updated weekly in early April, and then we move to daily updates during the active breakup and freshet forecasting season, which is upon us. The early season flood risk assessment is available on the Flood Hub as of yesterday. And then we are excited to launch the Water Conditions app, which offers the public added situational awareness of water conditions during, critical periods such as breakup and freshet. For example, a user can click on the map here for any site. This is the Klondike River, and folks can see flows or water levels where they are collected, and that way they can obtain up-to-date and historical data for specific locations in their communities. Active advisories can be found in the Flood Hub again this year. These are sent to a contact list for early and direct awareness for those involved in the response to these events. And a new advisory type that we are launching this year is the ice advisory, which has an added ice context during use for breakup and in case of an ice jam forms. So river ice conditions are changing, are expected to change, and river water levels can rise rapidly during this time. So this is what we will be launching this year as breakup is initiated. So in summary, Old Crow is our main concern for breakup. The Klondike Valley is our main concern for freshet. And of course, as you know, we mention every year, the timing and progression of snowmelt and precipitation are critical drivers of flooding, regardless of antecedent conditions. We continue to monitor conditions daily throughout the flood season, and we'll be releasing advisories as necessary, and using our new public information platform to share all our information, as well as using the Flood Hub for everything else. And that's all for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, EJ. We will now be hearing from Wildland Fire Management, Mike Smith.
Fantastic. Thank you. Share my screen here, and if you just confirm you can see, hear me, and see my screen.
Yep, looks good.
Great. Okay, good morning. My name's Mike Smith. I'm Chief Meteorologist with Yukon Wildland Fire and probably spoken to most of you before, so thank you for your time this morning. And I'll just provide a brief update on our Wildland Fire Management branch, as well as what we are seeing as far as start to the fire season. So first, we have our seasonal staff did start returning this year on April 1st. So most of our crew leaders are now back on strength and conducting recurrence training, getting ready for the season. The remainder of our seasonal staff will return throughout later this month and early May. And that's due in part to 14 agreements with First Nations. In addition to that, we do have access to the Yukon First Nation wildfire 20-person crew, as we have in past years, on an as-needed basis for fires. This year, we will once again have two air tanker groups. That's the water bombers. One of those still waiting to be absolutely confirmed. What will likely be a next generation jet-powered craft. So you can look for something a little bit new in the skies this year. And as well, I'll wait till the end for this one, but I'll give a bit of an update on some of the fuel mitigation projects that are going on around the territory. So as of today, we do actually have one active fire, showing a screenshot here from the wildfire hub. It's at Wellesley Lake. It was a fire that overwintered, so it survived the winter under the snow and was reported by some members of the community a couple of weeks back. Just smoldering right now, not presenting any risk to anything nearby, but that is currently being monitored. And just giving a shout to the fact we are mid-April, so that does mean that burn permits are required. And for anybody outside of Whitehorse, Dawson, or Watson Lake, that can be done through the local regional fire center. And for residents of those communities, they have to comply with community and municipal bylaws around burning. So jumping ahead to what we can and can't say about the upcoming fire season, what we look at this time of year is any risk factors in the forecast that might indicate really early melt or rapid melt of the snow, or any indications of really extended drying or periods with no precipitation. I put an asterisk there because April is a very, very dry month in the Yukon climatologically. So the normal April precipitation in most of the Yukon is about 7 to 10 millimeters. So April is a fairly dry month, doesn't usually play a huge part as far as mitigating the overwinter fire risk. But as I'll speak to in a second here, we did get ample snowfall over the winter, so we aren't looking too bad here. So starting off with what happened last fall once we started to hit freezing conditions, one of the big things we look at over the winter and to start the spring is something called the drought code. The word drought does have some parallels with how it's used in agriculture or in hydrology, but specifically for wildfire, we're talking about the amount of moisture in some of the dead and down forest fuels, and as well in the forest floor where fires can smolder away like that Wellesley Lake fire. So in the fall, we had some fairly high numbers. On the left is our 20-year average, or 21-year average, I guess, for the fall drought code. The numbers aren't too important, but just looking at the colors, we can compare that to what we actually saw in fall 2024. And we can see a few areas where a little bit drier than normal in October. So Faro Ross River, parts of the southwest, as well as the southeast were drier than that 2021 year normal. But thanks to our overwinter snowfall, and for this we do rely on both weather stations and also heavily on the snow survey data. So we do thank Water Resources and all the folks in the communities that do assist with gathering those data. And based on that, we can come up with on the left our average spring starting drought code, and on the right our projected starting drought code for this year. So again, just focusing on the colors, we're based on the overwinter snowfall and where we're sitting as of April 1st, we are looking at just a fairly average, unremarkable start to the year once the snow melts in the forested areas. So certainly haven't recharged all the forest fuels. So we do have a couple spots in the southwest around Destruction Bay, Champagne, Carcross that are arguably a little bit drier than the average, but not substantially so. And what that tells us is once the snow starts to melt in the forested areas, that the potential for any large, stubborn, really intense fires is pretty much nil to start the season. So then what we need to get that potential, as we did last year, is a couple of really hot, dry weeks. And typically that does tend to come at some point in June or July, but that's the ingredient that's missing. So to start the year, we're not seeing any real big potential. Really, the hazard will be primarily just grass or maybe twigs, things like that on a windy day. So um, things are looking pretty good to start the season. And jumping ahead to what we can and can't tell of the risk for this summer based on the forecast products. So I like to show this. I'm clearly not artistically inclined, but really just the slide gets after uh, on the day 1, 2, 3 forecast, we can get fairly predictive, fairly specific in what we try to predict. So we can predict a maximum daytime temperature, amount of precipitation, wind speeds, things like that. As we step out past really 7 to 10 days, we get into the really more statistical probabilistic approach. So we're not able or trying to answer the specifics that are important to fire risk. We're just looking at big picture, as in, does it look like it'll be a lot warmer than normal, colder than normal? And that currently, with the state of forecasts, that's about the best we can do. So with that in mind, looking at first the near term, so the rest of this week and the long weekend coming up, this is a picture of the forecast for the upper air. And for the purposes of this, just assume that red is warm air, blue is cold air, and what we have is just a series of waves that are coming through the territory. So have a couple of days of kind of cooler, stormier weather in parts of the territory, at least a couple days like we have seen the past few days this week of fairly sunny, warmer temperatures and cool overnight temperatures. So uh, nothing really lining up to show that either heavy precipitation or conversely like really hot and dry, anomalously warm conditions. So nothing of real concern there in the short term. We are looking at probably some rain, wet snow, mostly snow probably through parts of central Yukon starting Friday, Saturday, but those aren't really looking like enough to be of too much concern. Um, on the probability front, we start to look as we get into this sort of 2 week time frame. We look at what we call ensemble modeling. So that's essentially where we take a whole bunch of different weather models, plot them in one plot like here, and see do they agree or disagree, and are they showing any sign of again really warm weather, really cold weather, really heavy precipitation. So here we're showing that for Whitehorse. In the top panel, we've got that probabilistic forecast for temperature. I've highlighted the freezing mark here just to give some reference. And yeah, what we see is, today, maybe tomorrow in Whitehorse, trending towards a little bit warmer than the seasonal normal, which might be around the high single digits, but certainly still seeing overnight freezing temperatures well into next week. And then mid-late week next week, seeing arguably some kind of warming trend, but that's more the warming trend we typically see in late April, just on its own. So nothing too remarkable there. In the bottom panel is the same idea, but for precipitation, whether rain or snow. And again, here we're not focusing on amounts. We're just looking at is there a point where most of the models are indicating that there may be heavier precipitation. And in this case, for Whitehorse, really no sign of that at all. We may get some light rain, light snow, but nothing that's going to cause concern in terms of fire or flood. Same thing for Dawson here. I won't speak too much to the top panel there. Still seeing that moderate warming trend maybe through next weekend. But on the bottom panel, we are seeing maybe up to 5 or 10 centimeters that mixed rain, wet snow, higher elevations, certainly snow through Friday, or maybe even late Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday morning. So maybe up to 10 millimeters of water equivalent, mostly as wet snow. But again, nothing that really causes any concern from the fire or flood standpoint at this point. Um, Looking a little bit further afield for the end of the month, so getting into later next week up to about April 30th. This looks like a scary graph just because of all the red, but that's just telling us there's a very high probability that the last week of April will be a bit warmer than normal through central and southern Yukon. But digging in behind the scenes, that looks more like maybe 1 or 2 degrees above normal. So again, maybe some slight increases in melt rates, but nothing of real concern from the perspective of rapid melt. And then finally, we can look at that over a larger scale here. And we do see that Northeast BC, Northern Alberta, maybe the far southeast of the Yukon do have a decent chance of some daytime temperatures reaching over 15 degrees before the end of the month. But again, for most of the territory, we're looking at fairly seasonal, not especially interesting temperatures. And then finally, looking at more the seasonal scale. So this is the probability of above normal temperatures through April, May, June as a whole. And for these, the details matter as far as fire goes. So we can have a lot of different ways to get to above normal, whether that's every day is just slightly warmer than normal, or whether that comes as maybe 2 cool weeks and 2 really hot weeks. And those will produce really different results in terms of fire danger and fire behavior for any fires that do start. So this is where I say, unfortunately, for the longer term, we just can't get those details that matter quite yet. That being said, it does look like a pretty good chance of a warmer late spring, early summer for most of the territory, less so for the far north and maybe Dawson, Beaver Creek areas. But from the fire perspective, nothing jumping out here that is really cause for any concern. And finally, in the forecast front, just speaking to El Nino, La Nina, because they're in the consciousness quite a bit. Um, One, I guess the first most important thing is neither of these tend to play much of a role in Yukon summer weather. Quite often, it's a little bit overblown, and their effect on the weather across North America is a bit overstated. It certainly is a factor in some parts of the continent, just less so for us. So that being said, the best predictions right now are that we will remain neutral through summer 2025. So whatever impact those may have on, say, parts of northern BC or the rest of Western Canada, we don't really see that being a factor this year, regardless. So on the field mitigation and information fronts, I'll start with, I guess, reiterating the fire information page and the emergencies information page. So you can get to the wildfire hub, flood information, all that good stuff through yukon.ca/emergencies is the good landing page there. On the bottom there, we've got our fire reporting line, and we do still rely quite heavily on the public reports for new fires. A lot of ours do come in through the public, whether it's new fire reports or updated information on what's happening. So we do appreciate those. And on the fuel mitigation front, just a few updates. Probably the one that's most in the public consciousness is the Whitehorse South shaded fuel break. That's about 45% complete as of this spring. When it's done, it'll be about 750 hectares in size. And the work on that is a combination of removal of more flammable coniferous fuels and in many parts replanting of some deciduous trees that are a lot less flammable that do provide a bit more of that fire break that at the very least reduce the fire behavior, give fire crews a sort of control line to work off of and some additional options if a fire does approach the city of Whitehorse from the south. So there will be about 232,000 aspen planted this year, both in the fuel break and through other parts of the territory as well. And in addition to that, on a training and mitigation side, we do plan on doing some springtime prescribed fire in many of the same locations that our crews have done that in past years, largely grassy fields. And that serves the purpose to both reduce that grass hazard around communities and also helps in getting the crews trained up and back in the game for the fire season. So those are planned, and as we do reach conditions that may be appropriate for those burns, we will be reaching out and providing information on the when, the where, what people can expect to see, and as well as what's being done to make sure these are conducted safely. So I do want to thank you for your time, and I guess I will pass it back to the moderator here.
Thanks so much, Mike. Okay, our final speaker is Greg Blackjack, Director of the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks to our subject matter experts who keep us well informed as we move into this spring melt. I'm Greg Blackjack. I'm the Director of Emergency Measures Organization for Yukon Government, and I'll give you an update on the work that we're doing here in the emergency measures to prepare for this season. As you know, Emergency Measures Organization coordinates government's response to large-scale or complex emergencies and also works year-round on emergency preparedness. We've already hosted seasonal readiness briefings just like this one for our First Nation and municipal government partners, as well as our local area councils. Included the same subject matter experts to make sure our response partners are as informed as they can be as they start their planning for the spring. And over this past off season, we've met with 22 different governments and local area councils, again, municipal and First Nation governments, for meetings for planning and training purposes, as well as info sessions. Currently, based on the information we've received, we're focused on the Klondike and Porcupine regions. In the Klondike, at the beginning of the month, we were invited to attend a local emergency management group planning sessions. One of our EMO planners was up in Dawson working with Trondheim-Witchen, Dawson City Fire, Klondike Valley Fire Department, RCMP, Parks Canada, Search and Rescue, Canadian Rangers, and a number of YG branches, including Wildland Fire, Highways, Aviation, Emergency Support Services. And this was all getting us prepared for the upcoming season, making sure we're all coordinated in our efforts, and as well reviewing and addressing issues identified from our previous responses. So similarly, EMO's been working with Vuntech-Witchen First Nation up in Old Crow over the winter on planning and preparing for this season. On Monday, VGFN held an interagency flood preparedness response and recovery meeting, which EMO was a part of. For both rivers, similar to last year, when breakup's about a week away, an advisory will be issued and the local emergency management group will begin sharing daily updates on local platforms, working closely with our team here in the ECC, Emergency Coordination Center. If sudden or severe flooding is expected, that information will be released as soon as possible, as far in advance as possible on local platforms and alert ready to give people as much notice as possible to stay safe and to keep their properties safe. And we'll do the same type of advisory process for other rivers around the Yukon if we identify similar risks, and the local governments will be a part of that information process. Our emergency management partners, including local responders, all know how to contact EMO at any time. We have a duty officer on 24/7, 365 days a year, and they can contact us if they're requiring support in emergencies. And we've really been working to improve our interagency communications and public communications. And a key part of that is getting all of our comms teams together before the start of the season to ensure we're providing consistent information to the public and to our response partners. Information's key, and we want to make sure we're all speaking the same language and sending the same message out to keep things consistent. Now, for supplies, we have approximately 400,000 sandbags and over 3,000 super bags here in Whitehorse in our warehouse. And we also have more sandbags and super bags staged across the Yukon at different strategic points, highways, camps around the Yukon, so we can quickly deploy them to the communities as requested. And our 2 sandbag machines are in Whitehorse right now. One's possibly on its way up to Dawson right away here. And communities understand that they can contact us for any of these materials if they feel the need. And we're also in regular meetings, contact with other response partners outside the territory, including Public Safety Canada. They monitor closely as situations arise and as risks are identified to Yukoners, and they're ready to provide support if we feel the need. And we're working a lot with our internal YG departments as well to improve our operations year on year. Now, as my colleagues mentioned, Yukon government has made some changes to the Flood Hub, Wildfire Hub, and Yukon.ca to make information on these emergencies easier to find and understand. As mentioned, this year we'll release an ice advisory to indicate ice river breakup is on the way, followed by flood or evacuation related alerts if needed. And although ice jam flooding is difficult to predict, YG will make every effort to issue evacuation messaging and advisories for sudden or severe flooding through our alert ready system as early as possible before evacuation becomes necessary. These advisories, along with snow bulletins and spring flood risk assessment, are all also shared publicly online and on Facebook with media and directly with response partners and local governments. And we'll continue to inform Yukoners throughout this season as things progress. And in conclusion, everyone has a role in preparing for an emergency. Yukon Protective Services is running a public awareness campaign throughout April and May to inform Yukoners about how to prepare themselves and their families for emergencies. This includes putting together a 72-hour kit, creating an emergency plan for your home, and tips on protecting your property from floods and fires. This campaign will include print, social media, and radio ads, along with printed resources distributed through local governments. And these printed items are available through EMO, and the local governments know they can contact us if they require more of these. This campaign will culminate in Emergency Preparedness Week, which is May 4th to 10th, a national event in partnership with Public Safety Canada. And this year's theme is Be Prepared, Know Your Risks. We'll share more about our planned activities closer to this week, but a reminder that the Alert Ready system will be tested on Wednesday, May 7th at 1:55 Yukon time. And I'll close by reminding everyone that emergency preparedness is a shared responsibility. Visit www.preparedyukon.ca to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our 3 officials here for sharing the presentations today. Minister Mostyn, do you have any closing words before we move on to media questions?
Find my audio here. Thanks very much, Julia. No, I thank the officials for those comprehensive briefings this morning, and I'll open it up to questions for the media. I don't want to, their time is precious, so let's give them the shot.
Sounds like a plan. Okay. So for media questions, we're going to go outlet by outlet. And we'll start with 1 question each per outlet with a follow-up question, and then move on to the next outlet. So at the moment, I'm seeing Yukon News and CBC in the participant list, but I may have missed somebody. So after CBC, I will just do a general call out to see if there's anybody that I've missed. Starting with Yukon News.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess my question is just generally speaking, what's the message for Yukoners about the fire outlook? Like, Mike, you mentioned that it's nothing of real concern. And sorry, no, wrong note. Um, yeah, what's the ultimate like outlook on fires right now? What can you say?
Great. Yeah, it's I can say, I mean, as of today, very little risk, although we are reminding people about the requirement to get a burn permit before conducting any open burning. And then once the snow does melt, which would be likely the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will be starting the season with a low fire danger. So that would be at least to start, no risk of large, stubborn, intense fires. And beyond that is where I mentioned we just don't have that ability to really offer a usable prediction. But to get into the scenario that we were last summer with those larger fires in central Yukon, we would require at least a couple of really hot, dry weeks before that would be a risk. So low risk to start and see what the weather brings after that.
Thanks. If I can just add, there's a couple of points I'd like to just broadly, I think it's important that we, first of all, recognize, as Mike has said, the forecast, as good as it has become, and I can tell the media that the forecasting over the last several years is getting much more precise, but it's still a short-term forecast. Like the long-term forecast gets hazy despite all the technology and investment that governments have made in this stuff. Um, is still not. It's so much better, and we can predict up to about a week with fairly good accuracy. Beyond that, it's not. It starts to get a lot hazier. So what Yukoners have to do is take some responsibility around their homes and make sure you fire smart your homes. Like look around for areas where in the corners of your decks and your eaves troughing, all those places where um, burnable material can gather through the winds or whatever. You get little places where old dry leaves or pine needles or anything like that accumulates around your house. Make sure you do a scan and clear that material away from your house so that if there was a fire, then the firefighters who are trying to fight these blazes have less to worry about. If your house is looked after, it's less of a risk and they won't have to divert their attention away from the immediate danger and try to protect people's homes. So I guess just to put a marker down for that, we've all got some responsibility. If you own a house, go around, make sure that it's clean and neat and that you've cleaned up some of those little piles of debris that can cause a fire if, from embers coming off the nearby forest. And that would be a marker I'd like to put down for everybody.
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you. Dana, do you have a follow-up question? And then CBC, yeah, I will ask that question for you out after the second Yukon News question.
No further questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So CBC has said in the chat, does Yukon government help pay for folks to install a metal roof out of curiosity? So just asking there about funding support for fire smart actions by individuals.
No, we don't currently have we have lots of programs to improve the energy efficiency of your homes, and you can certainly look at those programs to increase, and perhaps I guess if you're doing an energy efficiency retrofit, you might look at if you have to re-roof or whatever, maybe you look at doing like metal roof. But at this point, we don't have support that grand for fire smarting alternatives. Though I do take it under advisement, it is something that it's an interesting idea for sure.
Yes, and I would also encourage Yukoners to check in with their local municipality to see about fire smart resources, such as, some municipalities will come and offer you a free assessment on your home. Second question, are there other fire smarting initiative government supports with funding? And that's also from CBC.
Well, I mean, on a macro scale, we're investing millions of dollars creating living infrastructure around municipalities, certainly around Whitehorse, in the Whitehorse South Fire Break, fuel break, which will be expanded. It's a multi-year project, of course. We've spent millions of dollars. We've had federal funding involved in that. We'll be planting poplars, which are hardy and more fire resistant, of course, than the conifer trees are in arboreal forest. So we're doing that work for sure. On the personal side for individuals, again, well, Fire Smart is supported through municipalities. They can do an assessment of your home. And when it comes to that stuff, if we're talking about cleaning up your yard, basically is one of the fundamental things you can do, which is very, very important and effective in reducing the danger to homes. And if you go to Fort McMurray or Lytton or Lytton's was really wiped out, but Fort McMurray, if you look at the houses that were fire smarted, you'll actually see that some properties were untouched when the fires went through, and some of that was attributable to the preparations that those residents made before the fires hit that community. And I've seen it in person, and it's impressive. So as individuals, we can certainly do our part by cleaning up our yard every year. And when we renovate, looking at ways to minimize burning around our homes.
Thanks, Minister Mostyn. CBC, I'm also going to pop a link in the chat here with information about our sort of community level Fire Smart funding program. So although we don't fund individuals, we do offer funding each year for sort of the intermediate level, so First Nation and municipal governments, school councils, nonprofit associations, that sort of thing. So all that information is online. So I've just popped that in the chat. We do have a bit of extra time, and the Yukon News has another question. So I will pop it back to Yukon News.
Thanks, Julia. Minister Mostyn, the Yukon Employees Union held a press conference yesterday alongside Yukon NDP leader Kate White, calling for presumptive cancer coverage for Yukon wildland firefighters. I know this conversation has come up before. I'm wondering, have you changed your mind on this matter, or do you stand by your previous statements around the need for more research?
There I am. Thanks, Dana. I appreciate the question. In a previous life, I was an employee at the Yukon Workers' Compensation Health and Safety Board. I take workplace safety very seriously. We have, in the territory, when we brought in the new legislation in 2022, we had the most expansive list of presumptions for firefighters and for employees in the country with our new legislation. I'm not averse to having a presumption for cancers that are commonly seen in professions. The issue is that we have a presumption. People who make use of a presumption are already sick. And my goal is to make sure people don't get sick. In some ways, a presumption is just an admission of failure because we're screening people easily through a system or fast tracking a system because we haven't prevented the cancer to begin with. So I want to make sure that we prevent people from getting injured on the job. That's very, very important. And to me, so when it comes to wildland firefighters, I want to make sure that if they are exposed to cancers, cancerous materials, carcinogens in the air quality. I want to know what those carcinogens are, and I want to know what cancers they are being exposed to, and I want to know how we prevent exposures to those cancers when you're working in the bush in 25-degree weather, slogging up hills and through the forests that is practical for firefighters to wear. And that's the main thing I want to do. And currently I will add that the uh, um, the research into what a person who is fighting wildfires in the territory specifically, who are not exposed to urban interface fires, where you get all the synthetic materials in a home or in a car or in our bicycles. They're not that, those are very, very dangerous materials in the environment in a wildfire situation, they're not exposed to those things. And so I want to know what the dangers are for exposure to carcinogens in a boreal forest. And we are continuing to look at that research. And the experts at workers' compensation in the territory and really across the country have not identified a prevalence of a certain type of cancer that wildland firefighters are exposed to. They'll say that some jurisdictions have adopted it. It's true. There have been 4 jurisdictions in the country that have adopted a presumption for wildland firefighters. Most of those jurisdictions also have their wildland firefighters fighting urban interface fires. Like there's a crossover there that we don't have in the territory, and our wildland firefighters are not trained for or deployed in that matter. So I really am continuing to look at this. I want to prevent any cancers that people are exposed to in the woods, and I want to make sure that they are protected that way. And if there is evidence that shows that people working in the bush are coming down with cancers, they have to then, if that evidence manifests itself in a way, I have no problem bringing in a presumption. And I am working I've spoken to WCB on many occasions about keeping up on the research, giving me updates on this, and keeping abreast. I have, as a politician here, I have no problem bringing in presumptions. As I said, the territorial legislation had the longest list of presumptions in the country when it came in 2022, but it has to be supported by evidence. And so far, that evidence is not compelling, is what I can say. But we're continuing our work on that front. That's a very long answer, and I apologize for that, but it's something I do care about. It is important, and I don't want to minimize that. I am looking at it. I'm looking at preventative measures, and hopefully we'll have more information on that fairly soon.
Okay, thanks, Minister Mostyn. So that was the final question from the news. And then we'll have this final set of questions here from CBC, which are in the chat. What is YG doing to prevent people? You may have, and Minister Mostyn, you may have spoken to this already, but what is YG doing to prevent people from getting cancer? Are you investing in new suits for wildland firefighters, and what preventative measures are you looking at? So I think, yeah, mainly what preventative measures are you looking at? And yeah, that'll be the last question before we wrap up for the day.
Yeah, and I'll take that really quickly. In wildland fire, we do have certain we have kit for wildland firefighters that hard hats, boots, all the rest of it is they've got a lot of personal protective equipment to keep them safe. We have washing stations now. We're looking at all sorts of things to keep our workers safe, and making sure that they're not being exposed to above the national average in wood smoke and that type of thing. So we're taking those precautions. The question is in terms of breathing apparatus, if they're getting coverage for the same same carcinogens you'd find in an urban interface. You know these heavy masks with oxygen tanks and stuff that you see our urban firefighters wearing. Those aren't practical in the bush over a summer in maintaining it, and we're not sure that it's necessary. So we're trying to do that work to make sure they have it. But absolutely, I know that the team at Wildland Fire can provide a detailed list of all the equipment they have to make, the personal protective equipment, to make sure that those workers are safe on the job. And we continue to look at the evidence and the research on carcinogens when it comes to people working on wildfires in the bush without being exposed to the urban interface. And if the evidence manifests itself, then we will look at what gear they need to prevent those cancers, and we will certainly consider putting a presumption in for those firefighters.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister Mostyn, and to our forecasters and emergency officials for speaking today. Thank you also to the media for being here today and for your vital role sharing information with the Yukon. As a note, I know that a lot of the material covered here today was fairly complex and technical. So as I said, I'm happy to send the slides along to reporters. Just shoot me an email after this. And feel free to reach out afterwards if you're looking to clarify any information or for further information. And just a reminder that it is fire season now. So our fire information officers are always available to speak by phone at 393-7415 if you have questions about what the fires or the fire danger are up to today. Thank you very much. And I will be ending the recording and the meeting now. Take care.
Thanks all.